Jesus girl. Jesus girl. Hey, it's the diary of a Jesus girl. Let the wings of the Spirit of the Lord just a swirl. You are in it, but you know you're not a part of this world. And for the swine, you should never cast your pearl. Yes, it's just the diary of a Jesus girl. The diary of a Jesus girl. Welcome to the Diary of a Jesus Girl podcast, where we discuss real life issues of the committed Christian woman. This podcast will inspire you to love Jesus and impact lives like Jesus. And now it's time for your host, Crystal Day, award-winning author, speaker, and Christian coach.
Welcome to another episode of the Diary of a Jesus Girl podcast. Yay. Listen, guys, I am excited about my guest. Like, when I was planning a podcast, her name was written like, I need to get her in on this podcast. And I am so happy that, this, dream is coming to pass. And I've been admiring her probably about the last almost 10 years. I've been following the ministry, Saved in the City. I've been wanting to go to one of the Saved in the City conferences forever, but I will soon enough. But I've participated in their challenges. They have had 21-day prayer challenge. I've participated in their fasting, and she wouldn't even know, because I'm here in Jamaica and she's having this impact on me. So this is just the amazing power of the internet, but also the power of Jesus Christ, that our story can go out and be an impact. So I want to say welcome, Brittany Morton. Welcome to the Diary of a Jesus Girl podcast.
Thank you, Crystal. I am so excited to be here. Hey, ladies. Any fellas that may be tuning in too, because the brothers like to tune in as well.
Yes, I agree. I've been seeing that. So Brittany, as I mentioned, she is a kingdom influencer, entrepreneur, just been doing an amazing job with the ministry Saved in the City. So I am excited to have this conversation with her. As usual, we know it will just flow, allow the Holy Spirit to flow. So Brittany, I want you to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, but the conversation we normally start with is, what's your conversion story? So tell us a little bit about yourself and share with us, how did you come to Christ? What was that journey like to come to Christ?
Yes. Well, first of all, I just want to let you know how honored I am to be on your podcast today. So thank you for inviting me. And I'm really excited about our conversation today, because I love talking about the Lord. So, but I grew up in church from when I was born into about 10 years old. And once I turned 10, the church that my family was attending split. And my mom made us leave the church. And so I was out of church from the time I was 10 years old until the time I went to college. I saw a lot of negative examples while I was growing up for those 10 years, but I had such a wonder, and I had such just a question about God and the things of God. I loved going to church, and now I know why. But then at a really young age, I didn't understand why. And I saw a lot of things that conflicted who I was learning God to be at a young age. And so I went off to college. I got kind of connected to a church, but nothing near what happened when I really came to the Lord. So I was dating a guy, and this is a part of my testimony. I was dating a guy that was from the Bahamas, and we dated for about 5 years. When I graduated from college, I moved to Nassau, Bahamas, to be with him. And so I was there for 2 years. We were preparing to get married, and my college called me, the college I had just graduated from, and said, "Hey, we have a job and we want you to come work." And I said, "No, I'm booed up pretty much, and I'm not coming back to the States." I was enjoying the island life, and I was home visiting my parents, and my mentor back at my alma mater, Alabama A&M University, called me again. She said, "Brittany, I really think you should come and just look at what we want you to do and how you want us to help us." So I was in town. I drove down to Alabama, and I told him, "Hey, I'm going to come help y'all," not knowing that me moving back to the States and moving back to Alabama, which is where I went to school, was going to be a setup for me to meet the Lord. I moved back to Alabama to work at this wellness center at my university, and my life turned I would say at the time it felt like it turned upside down, but it really turned right side up. My relationship failed. My engagement failed. I was devastated. I had made it an idol. I had put so much into that. Relationships just began to just disappear. Car broke down. I mean, everything that could happen began to happen in that season of my life, not knowing that God was using all of that to draw me to Him. And so I'm going through all of this, and I had someone contact me because of my gift and my background in marketing and design. And he was a pastor, a young adult pastor, and he asked me to help him with his brand. And at the time, I knew nothing about ministry. I knew nothing about Bible studies or anything like that. I was just a young girl trying to figure it out. And God used him and his community as I started to help them. I fell in love with Christ. I fell in love with ministry. And not only did I get saved, but I started helping them with their ministry. And then 5 months after that is when I launched Saved in the City.
Listen, I didn't even know that about you and the Bahamas thing. Like, Bahamas is one of my favorite islands. I always say I would live there for a little, a few years or something. But I mean, that's so we're gonna, just because we want to just touch a little. I know that you're still, you're unmarried, so you're still single, and this is something that you have been passionate about. You have done a few lives, about just being whole and single. And you have mentioned about, allowing marriage to be an idol. But to be honest, we're on the Diary for Jesus Girl. How did you walk away from, as you said, you were almost ready to engage. You were engaged to about to get married to now leaving and chasing this career which led to Christ. Like, practically, if somebody is listening and they're struggling, what advice would you give them? Like, how did you do it?
Well, let me tell you, and I'm not the person to be over spiritual, y'all. So I really try to be very practical in my faith, but I felt it. I felt something. I didn't know it was God at the time. I didn't know it was Holy Spirit, but I began to feel differently about the relationship, and I could not figure out why, because I had promised this man, that I was going to be with him. We had made all these plans. And when I began, when I moved back to Huntsville, I just didn't feel the same way. And I kept trying to make it, like, okay, what's wrong with me? This is what I want. This is what I said we were going to do. This is a good man. I really could not describe what I was feeling. And so we started having conversations, and he was much older than me. So he was ready to settle down. I'm still young, we went back and forth, and I realized it wasn't necessarily that I was wanting to lose the relationship. I just really didn't want him to be with anyone else, to be honest. And so once we began to just start having conversations, we both just had to make the hard decision that we have to break this off. And it wasn't easy. And I remember, because he wasn't really, he's a great man, but he wasn't a real spiritual man. And I remember him, the last conversation we had, he saying, you're going to end up being one of them preachers. You're going to end up being one of them. And I was so offended, because at the time people used to prophesy and say things about me, and I would reject all of it. Anything to deal with church or anything to deal with religion or what I thought was religion, I said, oh no, that's not going to be me, because I always felt like that would limit me or that would box me in, and I never wanted to be that way. And he said that, and I'm like, that's not true, whatever the case may be. So after the breakup, it was hard. I went into a depression. If it wasn't for God sending some people in my life in that season that could be strength for me to say, Brittany, you keep going, keep fighting, giving me scriptures, I don't know if I would have gotten through that, because I had put so much into that relationship. And so I literally had to take it one day at a time. And that's how I got through that separation and that breakup. And what happened when God began sending women to me who were dealing with things that were so similar to what I was personally in. I'm crying my eyes out with a broken heart, and he's sending women to me that are brokenhearted. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? Not knowing, again, because I didn't have a full relationship with God, so I didn't know that's what he was doing. But it was through the pain of that Saved in the City was birthed. So I always tell women, you have to go through the heartbreak. You have to go through the pain. You have to go through the process, because you don't realize what beautiful thing that can be birthed as a result of you facing it and going through it. And so that's been my testimony with that. So.
Listen. So Saving the City was birthed. Now, here's why I wanted to touch a little bit on ministry for us, because the truth is, since I've been on the online space, we have seen, I'm sure you have seen many little ministries come and go, and, everybody's, trying to start an organization and it just squell. But 10 years of, you starting from a little discipleship group to where you are in various cities hosting conferences, and it's been consistent. Like, talk to us about how, that vision was birthed, and practically how have you been sustaining? We know that God is God, and Absolutely. He must have been the foundation and the bedrock of it. But as you said, how practically too have you been doing this?
Yeah. So just to give y'all a couple of practical things, I can't start this conversation without saying it has been the grace of God, right? And I'm going to build upon that. It's been nothing but the grace of God, because there have been, so up until 3 months ago, Crystal, I was getting ready to quit Saving the City. Because of the COVID, ministry is 100% donations, and so our two biggest fundraisers for the year, we were not able to have those fundraisers last year. We had just brought on another employee right before COVID. So God sustained us through COVID. Then he transitions me away from the city where my team is. And I'm looking at the beginning of the year like, okay, how are we going to pay these bills? How are we going to do this? And I had got to a place about 3 months ago, and I shared this in an email that we recently sent out to Saving the City, where I was like, okay, God, it's been 10 years. I didn't ask you for this. You've done more than what I could ever ask. I don't think I can do it again or continue to do it, because I couldn't see naturally how things were going to come together. And I called my boss, my pastor, and he said, Brittany, if you have not seen everything God has shown you for this ministry, then you're not done yet. And so it's been so many moments like that over the 10 years where I was throwing in the towel, whether it was something personally I was going through. And I'm like, I can't help nobody with nothing. I'm dealing with perversion. I'm dealing with this. I'm dealing with that. Or whether it was a heartbreak in ministry from someone that I loved and have given so much to, that's walked away or did something. But it's literally been God meeting me at every place where I wanted to give up, at every hard place. It's been him sending encouragement. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the people. And it's not a lot, because sometimes we feel like we got to have this massive team of people. No, my core group of people, one lady, she was in her 50s. She showed up at my very first Bible study, and she walked with me. No one knew her name. No one saw her, but she was the backbone. When I was young in ministry, 23, 24 years old, she was my backbone. I lost her. She died at 3 days before our last conference in 2019. And I had to preach 3 days later. But God was so faithful throughout the journey. He sent people that when I wanted to give up, I would call. I don't think I can do this. I don't know what this looks like. No one's ever done this before. I don't know. I don't have a blueprint. He's put people in my life that have helped to keep me encouraged, that have helped to hold me accountable, as like the conversation 3 months ago I had with my pastor, to say, no, Brittany, you got to keep going. You got to keep pushing. And then he sends encouragement. Every time I want to give up, God does something. It can be the smallest thing to a testimony, or someone just sowing a seed, or someone, and it's like, I'm with you, Brittany. I'm with you. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And then the other thing is, I really have a clear vision of what God has shown me Saving the City is supposed to be. I have such a burden. And I know, and even on the times where it gets hard, I know I know our generation needs real ministry. I know women need real ministry. I know where I was the reason why I started Saving the City. And I know there are so many women that are still there trying to navigate through, how in the world do I get through this life with all of the trauma and all of the pain? And so those things are the things that have been able to keep me encouraged and to keep me going, for the last, 10 years. And I've had fun. That's another part. Take all the deep part out of it. I had to learn in ministry to enjoy it, because it can be heavy. And this, we do this work. It can be daunting, but as much as you can, have fun. So I keep it light. My team is like, okay, Brittany, bring it in. Because if I'm able to enjoy it and do it in a way that brings fulfillment to me at the same time, then it keeps me at a place where I look forward to doing it. And so I think those are some practical things that have helped me to be sustained over the last 10 years.
Wow. Wow. So I want you mention transition. And one of the things I've noticed, you have had different, as you said, relocating. There been various transition seasons. Probably you could share with us, probably one of the hardest transitions you have experienced, and tell us, how you have been navigating different transitions, not just in ministry, life, however. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the hardest transition of my life, I just went through it a year ago. As you know, I've been in Huntsville. We started the ministry in Huntsville. I didn't want to move to Huntsville. That's how God will do you. He'll get you to a place where you don't want to do it. Then you finally accept it. He's like, okay, yeah, we're going here and then. I'm like, wait a minute, time out. I just accepted that this is where we are and what we're doing. And so I've been there. God had been moving in Huntsville. We had just got office space. We had been believing God for 3 years for God to give us an office. We would literally do work in ministry all over the city, from the library to cafeterias to everywhere, for the time that we had started. And so God began dealing with me about transitioning last year. And I did not want to hear it, if I'm honest with you, Crystal. I had finally gotten to the place where I was accepting where we were. It took me forever, it seemed like, to get there. And he started dealing with me about another transition. And prophets began coming to me saying, hey, it's time to move. And I was terrified. I'm like, move where? Move in the spirit, not move in the natural, And so I didn't know what I was supposed to do, where I was supposed to go. I started trying to make stuff happen on my own. And finally, Holy Spirit revealed to me that I had to give the ministry back to him. I had to give everything that we had built back to God, my ministry, relationships, everything. And it took me a really hard time to wrap my heart and mind around that, because again, I kept saying, God, I didn't ask for this. And now you're asking for it back. And it reminded me of Abraham and Isaac, when Abraham had been believing God for a son, and he waited all of this time, and then he gets the son, and then God wakes him up one day and said, hey, I need you to go sacrifice your son on the mountain. And he goes and passed that test. And I believe I felt like I was going through the same thing. So I'm praying, I'm preparing my team. I'm not sure where I'm going or what things are going to look like. We had just brought in another employee. She's there with me. And in 2 weeks, God reveals to me my new assignment. And in 2 weeks, I have to move. I move away from everything that I had known, everything that I had built. And I came into a very hostile situation. I had grief. I had experienced grief when I lost Ray Michelle, the lady I told you that had started the ministry with me. But I had experienced a grief that someone passing cannot, the grief of transitioning seasons. That yes, it's amazing when God is elevating you and he's promoting you. That's amazing. But sometimes we don't talk about what we have to give up to go to the next place. And I had to give up so much. And I felt like it was unfair. I felt like, God, like, why would you put all this on me? I was not in my business. I was being obedient. And I felt like I was being punished as a result of that. And so I feel like me and God's relationship about a year ago, it went through probably one of the most challenging seasons and times I had ever been with God. I love God, but I didn't like him in that season. And I know religion tells us, don't say that, don't feel like that, or whatever the case may be. But I thought we were cool, like the way I thought we were cool. I thought we were friends. And things came in my life in that transition that I felt like I was blindsided. And I was like, God, you could have warned me. You could have said something. And so I had to walk through that season of being in a really difficult place with God. And now I'm a pastor. And now I still have the ministry in Huntsville. And now I'm trying to figure out everything that's going on in Atlanta, on top of things feeling like they're crumbling where I left. It was one of the hardest transitions that I've experienced in my life. And honestly, I'm coming up on a year, and I'm just now getting to a place where my relationship with God is being restored, where all the transitions, we're kind of getting grooves in both places. And I'm like, okay, God, I'm seeing why the transition, why the change, why you pushing me out the boat, because he had to push me out the boat. It was not oh, come on. No, he literally had to push me out into the water, into the deep. And now a year in, I'm seeing, okay, this is why you did this. And so, yeah, transition is not easy. But I am a testimony that when you trust God, even when you don't have all the answers, or when it seems unfair, or all of the other things I just described, he's going to make it all worth it.
Yes. So here's what I want to go back. You started ministry in your early 20s. Now you have been working with women for the last 10 years, hundreds, probably thousands of women that I'm sure would have said, I love God, but I don't know his plans for my life. I don't know what's my purpose. I have friends that, probably years they have been seeking Lord for purpose and they feel like he's not answering. So this is a two-part question. One, talk to somebody that has been in Christ, seeming like they're seeking God, but he's not revealing their purpose to them or their assignment. So talk to us about how you got that clarity or that go ahead to build this, ministry or walk out this purpose for your life. That's one. And then secondly, I want you to share, just an encouragement for somebody that feels like, and probably a testimony of you praying to God about something that he hasn't been answering, and how have you been going through that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love having the conversation about purpose. And just to make it real practical for any person that's listening, the first thing I would tell you is that you are indeed on this earth for purpose. God is very intentional. Nothing about your life is an accident. Nothing is a coincidence. Nothing. I think it's important when we have the purpose conversation that we realize that purpose is not a destination. For a long time, I was looking for a point or a place. I thought that if I went to school and I majored in this, my purpose was going to be that job. And then I got the dream job, and a week into it, I'm like, oh no, I cannot do this for the rest of my life. So I think you have to understand that purpose is a journey. It's not a destination. It's not this big idea. It's every single day I live on purpose, whether I'm at the grocery store, whether I'm at church, whether I'm in the hood, wherever I am, because I'm a child of God. Everything about my everyday, ordinary life is on purpose. So I think I will start the conversation there. I think the next part of it, right, when we begin to fine tune, okay, God, why was I created? And what problem have I been called to solve? I think one thing we have to realize is that God can't order steps that we aren't willing to take. I think sometimes we over spiritualize the things of God. We're sitting waiting for God to release something when he's presenting opportunities to us every day that we don't take advantage of because we're waiting for things to look a certain type of way. I didn't wake up one day and say, oh, I'm starting Saved in the City. No, I felt this, man, I really like helping people. And helping people led to me doing some volunteer work. And then I'm like, okay, I like helping. I started doing that. And I'm like, okay, I like helping women. Then I started helping. And this is another thing that we got to do. I started serving another woman's vision. I didn't just jump out here and say, oh, I got to start my own thing. I'm going to do my own thing. That was never my heart. I had a friend that was a teacher that had a nonprofit, and after school, she had an after school program where she ministered to her high school students. I started serving with her. I started serving her vision. I started pushing her vision. And as I was serving the opportunities that was around me, I started to get clarity. Things started to make me come alive. Certain things that I would help her with, like, oh, I would get excited about that. And I started paying attention to that. Then I got connected to my church, which every believer should be a part, my opinion, the word backs it up, should be a part of the body, should be a part of church or the kingdom or parachurch ministry will help you to identify what your gifts and your passions are. I got to my church 10 years ago, and the first lady at the church said, hey, can you help me plan my conference? Before I ever planned my first conference, I was planning my church conferences. I didn't even know that it was something I was good at, but I loved it. She let me do the whole thing. I started planning her conference. I had decorations everywhere, all of that stuff. So as I kept going, taking advantage of the opportunities that were around me, then it became more and more clear to me, oh, Brittany, this is what you're good at, which what you're good at is an indicator of what your purpose is and what you're supposed to be doing and what makes you come alive. And I started taking it one step at a time. So I would tell any young woman who's searching, sis, be completely faithful where you are right now. Sometimes we miss things because we're looking for a big thing when God is in the small things. How can you take advantages at your church? What opportunities are at your current job? What do you enjoy? What do you not enjoy? Do more of what you enjoy. Those type of things were the things that helped me to identify, hey, this is, and God is still unfolding it. I thought Saved in the City was going to be it. I said, man, I'm going to minister to women for the rest of my life. And God said, that's only a portion of what I called you to do. Here came anxiety all over again. I was like, oh, Lord, what am I supposed to be doing next? He's like, I'm going to show you one step in front of the other. One step in front of the other. And now as I'm continuing to trust him, even though the steps are shaky, because my faith is nowhere near perfect, he's continuing to unfold his plan to me as I'm being found faithful in whatever season he's called me to. So I really hope that helps someone in that conversation about what is my purpose.
Listen, and part B, I want that praying and not seeing God answer. Probably have a testimony and that, your brain praying, not seeing God answer. How do you deal with that, weight? That's
absolutely. Yeah. I'm walking through that in my life now. It's one thing I tell people all the time, like, it's two things. It's like, if you're just a believer and you walk with God and you just have to manage your day-to-day with him, that's one thing. It's a whole nother thing when you're a believer, you're trying to navigate through your doubt, your faithlessness and all of this, and you still got to lead people, and you still got to get up and preach, and you still got to get up and minister, and you're struggling with believing God for yourself. And so I'm in that season of my life. Even believing God for a spouse, that has been one of the hardest things for me to stay in faith in. Some seasons I'm like, oh yes, I'm believing God. And in other seasons, my phone's so dry all the time where I'm like, okay, God, I don't even know if you can do this, right? And so, or if you're going to do this, that's just one example of many examples in my life. And so one thing that I've done is accountability has really helped me. I have sisters that I have identified to say, hey, sis, I need you to help hold me accountable with believing God in this area of my life. That is something very practical that I put in. So I literally have identified accountability partners that are coming along with me to help me stay in faith with things that I'm believing God for. Another thing is being honest. I try to be honest with God when it's hard to believe him. I try not to be over spiritual, and sometimes I still am because I'm working through that. But I try to be honest with God about seasons where it's hard. God, I want to see it. I want to believe you, but I don't see it. Help my unbelief. Being very honest about those things. And also allowing God to shift my perspective, because I've learned that I can become so focused on what I don't have that I'm missing what God has already given me. And I'm not maximizing the season that I'm in. So I would tell any person, whether you're believing God for a spouse, whether you're believing God for a career change, whatever the case may be sure you're cultivating your skills. Be sure you're maximizing the season that you're in, because when it does happen, right? Because I've learned with every new thing that God brings into my life, yes, it's a blessing, but it comes with a whole new set of responsibilities. It comes with a whole new set of pressure. It comes with a whole new set. So now I'm coming to a place where I'm like, okay, God, I trust that you know what I'm ready for. And if I'm praying and being faithful and it's still not happening yet, then there has to be some other things that you're rearranging in me, that you're working outside of me. So then when it does happen, it is your will. So those are some things that are helping me. But Crystal, it's something that I am literally walking through each and every day of my life with my relationship with God.
Listen, and I think that's the idea of the Diary of a Jesus Girl, because a lot of time, like, on the truth is, looking at Brittany on social media, like minister, preacher, boss chick, and we're like, oh my God, she has it together. But now you're coming and saying, like all of us, we are walking this out, we are figuring this out. Now, you did a live about show up or give up, right? And I wanted to talk to us because the truth is, it can be discouraging to feel like, okay, dealing with that comparison on social media, depending on your age, you're like, oh, everybody is accomplishing these things. Where am I? I'm just going to throw in the towel, or guess what? I'm going to show up in my gifts. I'm going to show up despite my insecurities and my shaky faith. So talk to us about that aspect. What that live and what ministered, what prompted you to minister that to persons.
Absolutely. So I've dealt, and I try to be, and I'm working on it because social media, I've dealt with a really strong fear of rejection my whole life. And that's back to seeds of inadequacy being planted in me at a very young age. And so the idea of social, like I wasn't on the whole social media train. I had told God, and I know I'm not trying to be super, but that's just how we talk. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'll do, because I had got to the place where I was hiding behind Saving the City. So I'm like, okay, I'll push Saving the City. I don't have to, people don't have to know who's behind it. I had met a girl in the airport one day. She had on a Saving the City shirt, and I'm in Boston and my mind is blown away. And she's like, well, who are you? And I'm like, I'm the founder. She's like, I've never seen you before. This before I ever showed up on social media, because I was so afraid of being rejected. I was so afraid of people looking at me and misunderstanding me that I did not put myself out there. And so it's been a journey for me to even show up on social media. And now that I'm showing up on social media, God says, talk about this and show this and let people in on this, in which I've never had an issue. Anyone who's come to anything we do know how transparent I was, but it was a huge hurdle. And it's still a huge hurdle for me to consistently do that on social media. And so I'll tell any sister who's struggling with showing up or comparison, sis, you're not alone. There are like, I have to guard how long I'm on social media. I'll never forget. I'll tell this testimony because I know that we overcome by the words of our testimony. We were believing God for a building. This is just how the enemy will creep in. We were believing God for a building. We have been praying for 3 years for a building. I get on social media. This is in the midst of us praying. I get on social media, and one sister with the women's ministry, she just started her ministry. Boom, she had a building. And I'm like, stuff started trying to creep up in my heart. I'm like, God, how is, again, that comparison, that, okay, what am I not doing? All of that the enemy has tried to feed for so long just came to a head. And I had to take that thing to God, and I had to let God minister to me. So I say that to say, if a sister is dealing with that, since that's something I have to manage, and I believe every other woman of faith has to manage each and every day, but it's how you manage it. So a couple of things I do. One, I ask God daily. I'm seeking God to make me whole. Daily, I'm seeking God to search my heart, purify my motives. I want to genuinely be able to celebrate when I see my sisters and brothers win in the kingdom. Father, that fear, because that's usually what it is. It's that fear. God, let the perfect love of God cast out fear in me, so I'm not comparing myself. I can see someone else thriving and not feel like I'm less than. That's something I feel like that's a thorn for me, honestly. And it's something that keeps me constantly on the altar. And honestly, Crystal, I've come to the place where God may not complete everything in me on this side. And I have to be okay with that, because I believe that certain things that personally I struggle with is to keep me dependent on him. And so that's even changed my perspective on certain things that are just hard for me, because I was so busy trying to, okay, I just got to get to this place where this doesn't affect me no more. I just got to get to the place where I'm so whole that I'm celebrating that may never happen. But every day I'm trusting the Holy Spirit's going to make me a little bit wholer. He's going to make me, that's not even a word, a little bit more whole and a little bit more free and a little bit more. But I use those as opportunities for me to cling to him even more. And then I'm honest. I'm honest with my accountability of things that bother me. I'm honest with myself. Okay, Brittany, why does that bother you? Why do you feel jealous? I've dealt with jealousy for a long time, and I've experienced great breakthrough in those areas, because I believe I've had it on the altar, right? But there are things that I have to be honest with myself. I ask myself, well, why does that make you feel that way? What does that say about how you see God? Because that's what happens, how we perceive the world, and with comparison and fear and all that stuff, it really is an indication of how we see our Father. So then I have to go back to him and say, God, I'm feeling this way and I'm seeing this. That would imply that I see you this way. I need to know you more in this way, because when I know you more, then I won't find myself in some of these places I'm having to navigate through. And so that has been, again, nowhere near perfect. And when I understood that God wasn't looking for my perfection, I started a ministry, and I didn't know the Bible. Now, I don't know about us doing all that now. 10 years ago, it was a lot different. It's a whole lot of crazy stuff out there now. But I'm just talking about what God can do with a willing heart. a willing and a submitted heart. What God, not your perfection. He's not waiting for you to make sure you got all of your issues fixed before he wants to use you. He's looking to use someone to say, hey, sis, I'm this by the grace of God, and he's still working on me, but let's come home and do this thing together. And then we'll continue to do, what God has called us to do. And so as I'm continue to allow myself to learn that, is where I've been able to experience all of what I've been able to experience with God in ministry, outside of ministry, in spite of him still working on me in the process.
Listen, I feel like I'm just sitting at your feet taking notes. Like I'm looking forward to listening this replay again because, listen, I mean, you're just preaching. That's the best. You're just preaching. No. You mentioned, a little bit about the whole rejection and insecurities. And I do feel like that's one of the questions a lot of women, ask, how do you deal with overcoming that feeling of rejection? So I'm going to ask you to just help us to, just take us through what have you been doing to help you in that area. Also the insecurity piece. Because as you mentioned, what you find is that whilst the rejection, a lot of times it leads to, just you feeling inadequate in so many areas. But yet still, you have been trying to show up and not give up, as you mentioned. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I think the first thing I would say is that I didn't know I dealt with rejection. I really did not know that I dealt with the spirit of rejection. And I've shared this on my Insta story, on my Instagram, but I bought a book. I got introduced to this whole thing about deliverance, right? A few years ago. And I had a friend and I said, you know what? I'm going to buy this book for them because they're dealing with rejection. And so I got the book and I started to just skim through the book. And a lot of the things in the book revealed me. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm dealing with rejection. And so I think in order for you to start having a conversation about healing from something, you have to first be able to identify, hey, I'm dealing with this. And so it took me being able to realize that, hey, I'm dealing with the spirit of rejection for me to start on the path of being healed from rejection. Another part of that was me going to therapy, which I'm very transparent about going to therapy. I ended up initially going to therapy because I kept having bad breakups. So I was trying to figure out what's wrong with these men. Okay. So I go to therapy and I get to therapy and we began pulling back all these layers of my childhood and stuff. And I'm trying to figure out, what does this have to do with anything with my relationships? Not realizing that my childhood affected every way that I had looked at relationships. And so I think it was a matter of me becoming aware that, hey, Brittany, you're dealing with rejection. Then I had to identify, where did that come from? Where did the door of rejection be open in my life? And I realized it literally was open from I was in the womb. How I was conceived allowed the spirit of rejection to come into my life. I never knew that. Holy Spirit had to reveal that to me. So I have experienced not only, breakthroughs with therapy and being in worship settings, but I can't tell you how many times I've experienced deliverance and breakthrough on my couch with my journal, with Holy Spirit, as God is healing that little girl in me so that I can walk in the fullness of who God has called me to be as a woman of God.
Listen. I want to get into what I call 5 into 5 minutes, right? So I want you to answer 5 questions. You have about a minute and a half to answer each question, right? So, ready?
Ready.
Ministry. You are passionate about ministry, preaching. Talk to a woman that feels burdened, like God has called them to preach, but they don't know where to start. They just don't know where to start. But they have this burden to preach.
So what I would tell the woman that feels like she has a burden to preach, I would tell her that there is a place for her. For so long, I felt like because I wasn't a certain type of preacher or a certain type of minister or how I talked or approached text or how God dealt with me, that there wasn't a place for me because I didn't look like X, Y, and Z. So I would tell the woman who feels like she has a burden to be a preacher, a pastor, or whatever the case may be, but there is indeed a place for her, and start where you are. I never knew this is what God called me to do, but I got into the right environment and they saw in me what I did not see in myself. So this is the other thing I would tell her. Don't be afraid of getting in the right community. Don't be afraid of getting connected. Many women that have a great call in their life have experienced great betrayal. They have experienced being dropped because it's the enemy's plan to allow the very thing you're called to hurt you so much that you disconnect with it. So a lot of women who are called to preach and to minister and lead other women and do all these powerful things, they isolate themselves because of all the hurt they've experienced. But sis, you got to get back out there and you got to find the right community and the right tribe, because they're going to help pull that gift out of you so that you can operate in it the same way that people did for me. So that's what I would tell a woman who knows she has a burden and a call to lead and to preach.
Yes. Brittany, you mentioned entrepreneurship is one of the things that you have been, you are in, talk to us about entrepreneurship. How can a woman get into building a side hustle? I don't know. I'll give you a little longer than 1 minute for this one.
Let me tell you something. I got to put a child right here. Child. Okay. Let me tell y'all my journey to entrepreneurship is crazy because I didn't see, like, growing up, I was a hustler. I got into ministry. I was like, I ain't gonna worry about that. So no anymore. And God is like, no, I've called you to that too. So I want to tell the woman who's a woman of faith. Shout out to the women of faith. Kingdom women. That's who I'm talking to.
Yes.
I'm telling you, kingdom woman, that you're called to more. I'm telling you that you can slay demons and you can make your bag. For a long time, the enemy made me think that I could only do one thing in one space. And I bought into that. And the danger of that is you can be doing good stuff, but it's not everything that God has called you to do. So you could be preaching and teaching and helping people, but there's a part of you that's being starved because God said, I've called you to boardrooms and I've called you to enterprise and I've called you, and you're going to be able to do both. So I'll tell the woman of faith, the woman of promise, the kingdom woman, that it's not either or, it's and both. You can preach, you can teach, you can be a woman on fire for God, and you can also be a woman that makes her money and is about her business. Give yourself permission. The same way I'm having to learn myself to give myself to permission to be all of that and some. I'm preaching to myself. Do you hear me? I'm getting excited over here. Crystal, I'm going to have to do a dance.
Listen, number 3, I realize you love books. Tell me, 1 or 2 books that you would definitely say is a must read for the Jesus Girls listening.
Yes. Okay, y'all. So books. All right. So one book, I got to really get back into like reading. Oh, my life's been so busy. Holy Spirit was convicting me of that last night. But a very practical book that has challenged me is Boundaries. The book called Boundaries. I don't remember authors. I just know I got the book in there. There's this book called Boundaries for anyone that has grown up. If you've been listening to this podcast and you had a background like me that was a people pleaser, I was such a strong people pleaser and so afraid of being rejected. That book has really helped me. And it's something I have to constantly read to help me how to have healthy, godly boundaries. So that is one book I would say. And then there's this book, Holy Spirit, bring it back to me. There's this book on identity that I would recommend. I'm trying to remember the title of it, but I recommend all of our leaders in Saving the Cities to read it. I'm going to give it to you. I'm about to Google it right now as we're talking, but it's by Neil Anderson. It's a book about identity. I recommend Every Woman, Victory Over Darkness. It's called Victory Over Darkness. And it is a book simply about who you are in Christ by Neil Anderson. Victory Over Darkness. Those are 2 books I would recommend any woman of God read.
Nice. So, because you are a Jesus girl and you're very fashionably, you're always like cute and all. Give us some fashion tips for Jesus girls, because you know that depending on the church you grow up in, you should not be having blue hair in your hair and with your mohawk hairstyle and say you love Jesus. Right?
Let me tell you this story. First of all, I don't think I've ever been asked like a fashion question for church girls. So this gets me excited. But let me tell y'all this story. The reason, so I put God's stuff on the shelf when I was young because I said, I don't want to become a real Christian and then I can't be fly. Like I was like, I thought in my mind, if I was going to be this Christian, this woman that was sold out to God, I had to wear turtleneck dresses all the way down to the floor. Like I was like, no, when I found out God actually created me this way so that I could reach women like me, that's when the game changed. That's really when I started saving the city. So I think women, you have to realize that how God has uniquely made you, your style, how you present yourself, that is a part of your ministry. Don't allow, because you got to get this. Everybody's not called to reach the same people. I'll never forget when I first started going to my church back in Huntsville, one of the mothers pulled me to the side because I do understand modesty. I do understand being a woman of class. I'm not saying, I understand I'm a leader and I understand that I represent something bigger than myself. But I never forget she came to me and said, baby, I'm so glad you started dressing better. I think the 2 snares in my jeans, Crystal, must have messed her up. And so I was so grateful. I was so grateful that I was even in a place of maturity where I could receive that and I wasn't offended by it. Because God started to deal with me very early in ministry of, I created you this way, embrace it. If you would because there are going to be women who are attracted to that. And when they attracted to that, then you're going to attract them to me. So I think embrace your uniqueness before we even get into clothes and what you should wear and you shouldn't wear. Women of God, embrace your uniqueness. If you like your wig, sis, get you a good wig and wear. If you like to switch them wigs up, switch those wigs up. If you like the short, the long, however that is, there are women who don't feel like they have a place in the kingdom because they have not seen someone that look like them. That's why you have to embrace who you are. So that's the first thing I would say about fashion. The second thing I would say is, if you need a little help, sis, get some help. Like, I think we got to get to the place, especially in the kingdom. We're sisters. Yes. We're supposed to look out for one another. I've had plenty of sisters in my inbox, which I didn't know people looked at me like for fashion because I do my own thing and I really don't care. Like if other people like it, I'm the type of person, if I like it, I'm rocking it. But I've had plenty of sisters reach out to be like, hey, Brittany, what would you wear with this? Or what would you do with this? And I tell them like, okay, let's go shopping. One of my best friends, we went shopping together. So I was able to help her put stuff together. So I would say if that's something that you want to explore more, that's why community is so important. You want to put some stuff together. Don't be afraid to take chances. Also know your body type. I'm very petite and people would think, oh, she can wear anything. No, everything doesn't look right on me because I don't have all the curves, the bang bangs and the boom booms and all of that. It never came. I've been believing God for it for a long time and it never came. So because of that, I've had to find out what flatters my body type. There's certain things that I wear and how I wear it because I am so small so that it flatters my figure. So I think those are a couple of things I would tell a woman of God. 1, embrace your uniqueness. 2, sis, if you need some help, go get you some help, try some different things. And 3, understand, come into a place where you come to one with, hey, this is how God has made me, which is a whole nother conversation, a long journey that I haven't even started to talk about on social media, but I'm actually going to start to tell my story about that this week and embrace that. And then see, because it's the thing, Crystal, I got to a place where I'm like, okay, I can't change it. So how can I make it work with what I got? Like, this is what he gave me. Yeah. So how can I make this work? And so I understood that 1, my personality is a win for me, my spirit, my heart. I had to stop harping on, I ain't got a big butt and I ain't got this and I ain't got that. No, but God has given me some gifts and I can work those things. I can dress those things up, make myself feel good because that's what it's most important about. And then the world will get that positive energy that I put out through fashion, through how I present myself. So I really hope that helps.
Yes.
How you can present yourself. And as I always say, have fun. Have fun, take some chances, try some new colors, do some new things, have fun. And I think that once you exude it, people are going to feel it and they'll be attracted to it.
Yes. And the last question in this section, I want you, I'm tossed up because I want to ask you who do you think a Jesus girl is, and how can she walk that out, like, truly walk out that identity of being a Jesus girl? But then I'm also tossed with, how do you stay pure as a single woman?
Yeah. Oh, we can talk about all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, I love the question. You said, who is a Jesus girl?
Yeah, for you. And, how can you walk out that identity or, that calling of being a Jesus girl without being the pressure of perfection, oh my God, we all get it right kind of thing.
Absolutely. So I would say what I've learned in my journey, because when I first started, I thought a Jesus girl was one thing, and I was trying so hard to be something that didn't exist. I think for me, what sums up a Jesus girl is a woman that's courageous. I think in the world that we live in, it takes so much courage to be different. And when you're really about this God life, it causes you to have to be set apart. And I'm not talking about like no weird, I'm over here, I can't, no. I'm talking about when you're a woman of standard, and when you're a woman of virtue, and when you're a woman that, like, how you carry, I think that takes a lot of courage. It takes courage to believe in something you don't see. It takes courage to walk away from things that you know that's not best for you and not God's best for you, so that you can walk into the promise that he has for you. It takes courage. So I would say a Jesus girl is a woman that is brave enough to bet on herself. Because in order for you to get to God, you got to count yourself worthy to even go after him. So a Jesus girl for me is a woman who is courageous enough to go against norms, to say, I'm going to be who he's called me to be. So that's the first part. And I really feel stirred up about that. So shout out to all the Jesus girls, because it's not easy living for God in this society. It's not easy. We're bombarded with, should I compromise over here? Maybe I should just go over here. Maybe I should just sleep with them. Like, it's not easy. So shout out to all the women that says, it's not perfect, I'm still figuring this thing out, but I'm choosing daily to follow after Christ. Shout out to you, sis, because those are real ones, Crystal. Anybody can live through the world standard. Anybody can do out here and do whatever. But for you to say, no, I'm going to live my life this way, I want to honor God in what I do, it takes real courage. And we got to celebrate that in the body of Christ. And so, that's what a Jesus girl is to me.
Let's say, like, I feel like, I'm like,
woo! Shout out to the Jesus girls.
Gotta get to this one out. And I really would want you to just touch on the purity one, because
absolutely,
I've always said that when you are not being pursued by a guy or anything, purity seems easier. You're your girlfriend, doing we're doing it. But then once you probably find somebody that you like, or, or somebody pursuing you, you find that, you fall into compromise a little bit more easier. So how, any encouragement for, persons that are trying to walk out this purity life?
Absolutely. I used to feel, I'm going to be completely transparent because that's the only way I know how to roll. I used to feel so unworthy to have this conversation. I thought that once I gave God a yes, I started teaching this. I'm 25 years old. I just broke up, from an engagement. I don't have anybody in my life, as you said. I thought I wasn't going to have those struggles. I just thought, hey, I gave God a yes. I'm not going to be tempted like that no more. Me being naive. And I'll never forget, I share this story often. A couple of months into leading Saved in the City, I actually got an STD. And I probably was like 5 months into leading. 5-6 women coming, I'm excited. We learn in the Bible, we're teaching purity, whatever the case may be. And not only did, I have a fall, which brought so much shame that I did not even want to show up for another Bible study. But on the other side of that, I get an STD. So here I am talking to other women about something that I'm struggling with in my own life. And now I have evidence that I even have to get surgery for so that it doesn't cause cancer in my body. So I went through so much shame and guilt and feeling unworthy and condemnation, because there was something the sanctification process in that area of my life was still underway. And so there was so much that I had to fight through within myself. I had to fight through the enemy for me to know that in spite of my struggle, even with purity, because purity is not just with body, it's with your mind and heart first, that I was still worthy. And so I think I'll start the conversation there, because so many women come into this context and they may have similar stories or different stories. I talk about my addiction with porn and all of those different things because of the doors of perversion that we don't talk about that were opened up in my childhood that we didn't talk about in my home, and all of those different things. And then I'm gifted, so my gift is on top of all of these other issues that had not been dealt with. And I thought if I love God, if I just love God, that these things change, and they didn't. So I've had to walk through, and it's a journey that I'm still on. I'm much stronger than I was before, but my flesh is still weak. So I don't even put myself in a place now where I'm like, oh, I'm 10, 15 years in, I got this. Oh, no, ma'am. Because I've fallen so many times in this area, I can't trust myself in this place. And so it took me understanding what was the root behind me wanting to be wanted by a man. It took me understanding, going back to that rejection piece of, okay, I don't really feel like I'm worthy of someone choosing me, but even if they choose me for these 5 or 10 minutes, I'll settle for that. So it took me getting healing and getting truth and getting revelation at the realm of my worth that has helped me to walk in a new level of purity. Again, as I say, I've learned purity is not just me keeping my body to myself because I'm single. Purity is what I watch. Purity is, I know me. I know because of my past falls, there are certain things I can't handle. So I don't put myself in those situations. I love music. I love all types of music, but certain songs I can't listen to. I love good entertainment. There are certain television shows I can't watch. There are certain things that I've just had to put in place for myself so that I can maintain purity, because now I understand that purity is not some mandate to punish me. Purity is for my own protection. And when I understood that every time I chose something outside of God's will for me to walk pure, I felt pain on the other side of it. And for me, at this juncture in my life, at 35 years old, it's just not worth it anymore. I tried it my way a lot of times, and I find myself in a worse spot. So I'm in a place now where it's like, God, it's me and you. I'm doing it your way because I'm trying to get a different result, even in my life, of what you've promised me. And so I hope that encourages, a woman on her purity journey. Deal with the root of that thing, sis. Deal with the fact that you don't feel worthy, or deal with the fact that your father never affirmed you, or deal with the fact that you feel like a little attention is better than no attention. And as you and Holy Spirit begin to be ministered to there, it's going to build you up to withstand some of the temptation, because you're still human. And a lot of this stuff is natural, right? But I've witnessed in my own life that God is able to keep us as we're embracing some of the things, that I've shared, that I've had to learn through error. A lot of error in my own life, in my own journey with walking with the Lord.
Listen, I don't want this podcast to end, but I understand, Brittany, time and all of that. But listen, I don't know, like, everything that comes from your mouth is so important. And I want to thank you, just again, a girl in Jamaica, you don't realize that your ministry has just, been having such an amazing impact. And I know that, it's the God in you, it is the God in you. So I want to thank you for that. But just before we close out, I want you to tell our listeners about Saving the City. So again, guys, I can tell you my personal experience. I've been following them. I've, joined the different challenges every year. At the beginning of the year, they have, a fasting, a 21-day fasting, and I purchased the ebook, and, that's been a blessing for me. But tell us about Saving the City, how we can get involved, how we can support financially, and just how we can connect with you too.
Absolutely. So Saving the City is, so dear to my heart, ladies. We're celebrating, as Crystal said, our 10th anniversary. This is something, as I've shared with y'all on this podcast, that was birthed from a place of pain and a place of rejection. I wanted to create a space for women like me, the women who felt like they didn't really have a place, that didn't really know the next steps of what they felt a tug from God, but didn't know what it looked like. I wanted to create a space where women knew that they wasn't alone, that you could be young, you could be old, you could be somewhere in the middle and be on fire for God and it not be weird. And that's why I created Saved in the City. I never knew that that small seed was going to blossom and even impact people such as Crystal in Jamaica. So over the years, we've grown. We didn't start that way, as I was telling you all today, but we've grown to have Bible studies in different cities in the U.S. We've grown to host conferences and to disciple women. And we're at a real turning point right now. God is really calling us to do some new things. And at first I was like, I'm scared, but now I'm willing. And so we're looking forward to continuing to provide a safe space for women to come and grow and get connected and grow and just really discover who they are in Christ and how Christ has called them to be an influence in the world. So I invite you all to follow us on social media. We're at Saved in the City on Instagram. We're at Saved in the City online on Facebook. We're on Twitter, Saved in the City. Go to our website, www.savedinthecityonline.org. I'm not sure when this podcast is going to air, but we do have our upcoming event and experience that is virtual and it's in person. But for those of you around the world, it's on September the 11th. If not, we'll be having some other stuff going on as well. So if you follow us, get locked into our website and our social media pages, you can stay connected with everything we have coming up.
Thank you again so much, Brittany, for coming on. I'm looking forward to another sleepover on your page, but also, virtual experience with Saved in the City. Thank you again for your obedience. Ladies, listen, definitely go and connect. You will be encouraged. Join their prayer calls most Monday mornings. And also, please, if you can, just sow in the ministry. You don't know, how many lives you are blessing, and we're here to support each other. So again, thank you, guys, for listening for another episode of Diary of a Jesus Girl podcast. Reach out to Brittany, let her know that you heard her here, and one takeaway that she have shared. I know that I'm looking forward to listening to the replay, and we're out for this week. See you next week for another amazing episode of the Diary of a Jesus Girl podcast, where we discuss real life issues of the committed Christian woman. And as Brittany says, continue to walk courageously as a Jesus girl. God bless you.
Diary of a Jesus girl. Jesus girl. Hey, it's the Diary of a Jesus girl.